we gotta talk about Gaza, because it's bad. It's really bad. We saw Marco Rubio try to clean it up. We saw him do his best. We saw him talk about like this is like an affirmative, positive vision for the Gaza Strip. That's how Marco Rubio and others say, well, you know, everybody else is talking about Gaza as this, terror cell. We're talking about it as an aspirational, positive vision for the future where things can be rebuilt. Now, in all of this shining repackaging of what Trump had said, had been the complete ignoring of when Trump said that America was going to possess Gaza, that we were going to have it, that it would be ours. And when he says that, it doesn't come off with the inclination of America will have temporary ownership before giving it back to his people, especially since Trump has talked about multiple times about why would the Gazans want to return to Gaza? It's a destroyed, it's destroyed, even though like he talks about rebuilding, like you would rebuild it and then they could go home. It led many to believe that Trump was advocating for the United States to take permanent ownership of the Gaza Strip and then rule over it. And then he talked about it being this kind of beautiful place in the Levant where people from all around the world could come and have wealth and prosper and live together in harmony. Now, at no point during this message about the future of Gaza did he find a place for the Palestinians in this message. And when he talks about us taking it over, it all left the taste in people's mouth like, wait, are we going to actually just like conquer and annex the Gaza Strip? Because that's what it sounds like. He says, we're going to get it. We're going to take Gaza. He kept retouching that. But then Marco Rubio talks about it and just ignores that part completely, almost like he's hoping Trump just stopped saying it. Almost like he's hoping that Trump just kind of forgets about it. But here's the problem. If you're going to go out there and do cleanup work for Trump like Marco Rubio did, you got to make sure Trump isn't immediately, once you're done sweeping and cleaning the floors, going to take the dirty water and then immediately pour it back onto the floor, which is what he did in a press conference with a Jordanian king today.
I really think we're making some very good progress.
Mr. President, you've said before that the U.S. would buy Gaza, and today you just said we're not going to buy Gaza.
We're not going to have to buy. We're going to have Gaza. We don't have to buy. There's nothing to buy. We will have Gaza.
What does that mean?
No reason to buy. There is nothing to buy. It's Gaza. It's a war-torn area. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it. We're going to get it going eventually, where a lot of jobs are going to be created for the people in the Middle East. It's going to be for the people in the Middle East, but I think it can be a diamond. It can be an absolute tremendous asset for the Middle East, and you're going to have peace. It's going to bring peace in the Middle East. Gaza.
Not only is Trump still planning to take over it and possess it, and he's talking about it, he's saying that an American conquest of Gaza shall bring peace to the Middle East. And he's saying this right in front of the Jordanian king, like right in front of him. And we're going to watch more of this conference. And the reason we're going to watch more of this conference is because I have like a full good 6 minutes of just crazy nonsense that we have to go through. But this is clear. We're not going to have to buy. We're going to have. We don't have to buy. There's nothing to buy. We will have Gaza. That seems an American possession of Gaza, which would have to be maintained with an American troop presence. American troops on the ground in Gaza, cleaning up IEDs and getting harassed by Fedayeen fighters. That's not what Americans signed up for when they said America first, when he was lambasting against all these people for the crazy war in Iraq, which he originally supported. This is the type of thing that's going to piss off really a decent, significant portion of his base. Has nobody in Trump's inner circle came up to him and like tapped him on the shoulder and said, bro, dude, you gotta cut it. This is not gonna fly with our crew. This isn't gonna fly with our people. But he hasn't. He just keeps going and going and going. He keeps doubling down on this. Listen to this.
We're going to buy anything. We're going to have it, and we're going to keep it, and we're going to make sure that there's built there, including hotels and office buildings.
Here it is.
Nobody's going to question it.
Buy Gaza.
We're not going to buy anything. We're going to have it, and we're going to keep it, and we're going to make sure that there's going to be peace, and there's not going to be any problem, and nobody's going to question it, and we're going to run it very properly, and eventually we'll have economic development at a very large scale, maybe the largest scale on that site, and we'll have lots of good things built there, including hotels and office buildings and housing and other things, and we'll make that site into what it should be. And the people from Gaza who wouldn't be able to be there for years, because you're talking about just to get it and prepare it and to take care of all of the problems that currently it has, as you know, tunnels, and people are in those tunnels, and you have some good people and some bad people, and you may have hostages right now. You know, you have the hostages possibly there. They don't know where they are. And, you know, I have a Saturday deadline, and I don't think they're going to make the deadline personally. I think they want to play tough guy, but we'll see how tough they are. But it's going to be a wonderful thing. It's going to be wonderful for the Middle East. I think it'll turn the Middle East. I think you're going to have peace in the Middle East. You're going to eventually have peace in the Middle East.
You will eventually have peace in the Middle East once America controls Gaza. And I mean, even in the scenario, because sometimes when you talk about Palestine, the picture of them is never particularly clear. And let's say we get the better version of the story. Let's say we get the best version possible. And the best version possible is America goes in there. And of course, this is not necessarily the best for Americans, but I guess best for the Palestinians. America goes in there, clears up all the explosives, rebuilds everything. And then they're going to give Gaza back to the Palestinians. But we know how Trump is. We all know who Trump is. Trump is not a type of guy to go in there, take all this cost, and then not point to somebody and say, you got to pay the cost. And that people is going to be the Palestinians. And so what are they going to have to pay for the clearing and the rebuilding that they don't really seem to give much of a say in? How do they pay for this? Do they pay for it through debt? Do they pay for it through, you know, allowing Trump to put some hotels that he wants to and like prime Gazan real estate and allowing him to control Gazan redevelopment? Do they American or Israeli dominance economically of the Gaza Strip? Giving some of the Gaza Strip up? Giving some of the West Bank up? Giving up some amount of political control? Maybe not some, maybe a lot, maybe all political control entirely for a period of years, if not forever. And this all assumes that the Palestinians are let back. So, I mean, this is a crazy plan that's going to be expensive, that is going to add to the deficit by quite a large portion. So if you voted for Trump as a financial hawk, you know, a finance hawk, I would like to say, fold again, I guess. And I don't want to say ha ha because I'm in the ship too. So I'm not going to laugh at the sinking ship. I'm going to get salt water on my shoes as well. But I don't know what you expected. He did not make finance issues or fiscal responsibility a big issue in his campaign. He always made the idea that the foreigner or the other or the evil, like immigrant rapists, they were getting all the benefits. They were taking from hard-earned tax dollars that the American public had paid into for the benefit of their roads, their bridges, their hospitals, their public schools and such, their police officers, their firefighters, and instead is going to, like, whatever theory he says, eating dogs and cats, I guess. Eating dogs and cats. This is a terrible, terrible idea. Not only because it's going to be financially devastating for the United States, but because this could mean American troops coming home in coffins if we're going to be cleaning up the IEDs and then being strafed. We're going to have to actually administer the state. We're going to have to rebuild the state. We're going to have to deal with law enforcement in this area. And it's going to gratefully worsen our relationship with many other people in the region when the United States is actively trying to pivot out of the Middle East from Eldridge Colby and all these other types of like, oh, we need to pivot away from Ukraine. We need to pivot away from this. We need to concentrate on China. And that's what Trump's government is made up of, a lot of China hawks, and kind of weird realist types, right? China hawks and realist types. How are you going to pivot away if you're trying to make a Puerto Rico of the Levant? How are you going to pivot away? How are you going to relocate your resources to Taiwan or Japan or the Pacific or freedom of navigation operations, or try to bring down costs as you're having conversations with the Ukrainians about replacing American troops with Ukrainian troops as compensation, trying to find ways to cost cut and you just, oh, let's rebuild an entire civilization from the ground up. A civilization that hosted 2 million people. That shouldn't be expensive. This is a terrible idea. We'll lose soft power. We could lose American troops. We'll lose a lot of money. And at the end of it, we might not even still possess Gaza. You know how Trump talks about the Panama Canal and Jimmy Carter gave up the Panama Canal for $1? How long is it going to be until we have a future American Jimmy Carter giving up the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian people for like a nickel? Or possibly the Israelis, depending on which way it goes. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. And by the way, I don't know if you heard at the end of that about like, oh, we have the Saturday deadline. For those of you who don't remember, there was a deal that was negotiated between Israel and Hamas for a 6-week ceasefire. It was one of the last things that Biden did as president, was to have his framework agreed upon for Hamas and Israel for a peace. Not a peace, a ceasefire. And the way it was supposed to go is it would go for 6 weeks, and then it would go into phase 2, and then phase 3. And as long as the ceasefire wasn't violated in those 6 weeks, then until the first shot was fired, like the ceasefire just kind of naturally extends and can be extended by the handovering of hostages. Well, we're like on week 4, I think. I think we're on week like 4 since the deal was agreed upon, maybe week 5. And Trump has said that this upcoming Saturday, is Trump's deadline for Hamas to release every single hostage. All of them. All of the hostages. Now, a reminder that the 6-week deal was not a deal to release all the hostages. It was a deal to release a lot of the hostages for a lot of Palestinian prisoners. And then after that was done, after the 6-week period was done, then they could touch base on trying to figure out how to release more hostages for probably more continuations of the ceasefire deal or a permanent settlement for an all-in-all deal, right? That was the more hopeful vision that, we were honest at the time, probably did not have the highest chances of success. And the reason I didn't think it had the highest chances of success is I thought once those 6 weeks ended, Hamas would come to the realization that the Israelis are just going to keep negotiating more and more hostages away until they had no hostages, and then Israel would try to destroy Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And so Hamas would eventually either request so many hostages who had committed such horrific terrorist attacks in Israel, or there were just so many numbers on the prisoner exchange side that the Israelis would just not be able to fulfill the demand, or just not be able to come to terms in some way, right? There'd be some way they would not be able to come to terms unless the Israelis offered a permanent peace settlement that would allow Hamas to survive, because the organization, despite the loss of Sinwar and much of its military and political leadership, is still struggling with survival. And according to Anthony Blinken, the previous American Secretary of State, has actually retained, while it has lost a lot of its veteran leadership, and obviously the loss of experience hurts the organization, they've lost quite a lot of equipment, they have been able to regain much of the rank and file that they lost to the fighting. So Hamas is in the survival mode, and the end of the 6 weeks comes around and Israel goes for a longer deal. I thought the odds were they would make some demand that would not be fulfilled, or they wouldn't be able to come to terms in some way, and then the fighting would resume because Hamas does not want to give up the last piece of leverage it has, which are the remaining hostages. Now, this means even the 6 weeks. This would mean, if what Trump is saying is true, that we wouldn't even get through the first phase, which I thought we would get through. I thought we'd get through the first 6 weeks and then it would die, which means we're like a couple of weeks early for the death of the ceasefire if this Saturday really is the deadline and Hamas does not yield to Trump's demands, which I think is incredibly unlikely due to the lack of leverage they would then retain, and the fact that they would probably continue with the military operation anyway. Whether they give up the hostages or not give up the hostages, the Israelis are going to continue to bomb Gaza. The Israelis are going to continue to launch attacks in Gaza, try to destroy Hamas. It's really just a question of scheduling. And I know that's a gross way to put it, but I don't know how else to put it. It's really a question of whether it's going to happen this Saturday or 3 weeks from now, and whether or not they're going to retain the hostages this Saturday or 3 weeks from now, because the Israeli public really, really, really wants to see those hostages get home, and that's the last piece of leverage they have. So odds are this Saturday, the war is going to restart, and the current plan we have, no matter how much of a cleanup job Marco Rubio does not have the Palestinians in the picture. Let's listen a little bit to what he had to say to the king. I'm just too curious.
Mr. President, many people in the region, especially Jordan, are worried about the annexation of the West Bank. Will you give His Majesty the King guarantee that you won't allow Israel to annex the West Bank? And how are you going to
I think that's going to work out very well. That's not really what we're talking about today. I think that's something that's going to work out automatically, and it's in good shape.
The West Bank will work itself out automatically. Then why are we even there? Why do we need to... Why are we taking possession of the Gaza Strip of all of these issues and just like, poof, work themselves out?
Shape, and we discuss it. Other people have discussed it with us and with me. That's going to work out. West Bank is going to work out very well.
Mr. President, why should the king take in the Palestinian people? He's made clear he doesn't want to.
Well, I don't know, but he may have just something to say because we discussed just briefly. I think maybe you want to say it now, or?
Well, Mr. President, I think we have to keep in mind that there is a plan from Egypt and the Arab countries. We're being invited by Mohammed bin Salman to discussions in Riyadh. I think the point is how do we make this work in a way that is good for everybody? Right. Obviously, we have to look at the best interests of the United States, of the people in the region, especially to my people of Jordan. And we're going to have some interesting discussions today. I think one of the things that we can do right away is take 2,000 children that are either cancer children or in a very ill state to Jordan as quickly as possible, and then wait for, I think, the Egyptians to present their plan on how we can work with the president to work on the Gaza challenges.
So
I want to tell you, excuse me, wait, just please. I didn't know that, what you just said, 2,000 children with cancer or other problems, and that's really a beautiful gesture.
This comes from, we got to take out their families, by the way.
Really good, and we appreciate it. And we'll be working on the rest with Egypt. I think you're going to see some great progress. I think with Jordan, you're going to see some great progress. Three of us, and we'll have some others helping, and we're going to have some others at a very high level helping, and the whole thing will come. It's not a complex thing to do. And with the United States being in control of that piece of land, a fairly large piece of land, you're going to have stability in the Middle East for the first time. And
what does he think? What happens when he takes over the Gaza Strip? American troops are just getting sniped now in the Gaza Strip from under rubble and like FPV drones blowing up American Abrams in Gaza. And the rest of the Middle East is not peaceful. There's still Iranian militias in Iraq scuffling with other militias. There's still violence in northeastern Syria because he's been unable to stop the Turkish bombing of the area of an American ally that helped us defeat ISIS. There's still no permanent settlement for the civil war in Yemen, and the Houthis continuing a fire of missiles into, like, what happens when the golden age never comes? And we saw what happened with the QAnon movement when, the revolution never came, and it was just a redefining. It was just a redefining of what you thought you knew about the terms of the Great Awakening. And I guess it's just going to be a detailed redefining of the American Golden Age, which instead of low grocery prices, you got patriotic, expensive American eggs.
the Palestinians or the people that live now in Gaza will be living beautifully in another location. They're going to be living safely. They're not going to be killed, murdered, and having to leave every 10 years, because I've been watching this for so many years. It's nothing but trouble. Everyone's being killed. They're being robbed. It's like living in hell. And they're going to end up having a great home, great families that don't have to get mugged and killed and beaten up and harassed by.
Okay, well, imagine if this was a solution in any other area. Imagine you are a little old grandma who's lived in an area of, let's just say, Baltimore. It could be Chicago. It could be anywhere, honestly. And you have a problem with crime in your community. You see people, they're dealing drugs on your street corner. And at first you're like, it's bad, but I don't want to get the law involved. But then one day, you see someone get shot on your street corner. Shot and killed. Horrible. Terrible. Now, okay, somebody buying the little, you can look past, but you can't look past this type of violence being brought into the neighborhood. That bullet went through your window. So you call the cops and they say, oh, you're right. There's been a gang problem in that neighborhood for like at least a few decades. I think it's time to move it out. We'll move you out next Friday. What? Click. And before you know it, a week later, you and all of your neighbors are being moved out. The whole neighborhood's going to get demolished, and it's going to be replaced by Trump casinos. And hey, look, he solved the crime problem. Does that sound like something that was directed towards helping the people who live there and get them away from crime? Or a way of placating the public on the issue while enriching yourself or your interest group?
By Hamas and everybody else. And I know we'll be able to work something. And what you just said about the 2000 is fantastic. It's so beautiful. It's music to my ears. But we're going to be able to work something. And I know we'll be able to work something also with I believe, not 100%, but 99%, we're going to work out something with Egypt.
But Mr. President, during your election campaign,
Mr. President, how is the U.S. going to own Gaza? Your White House has made clear taxpayer dollars won't be used for this. So what money are you going to use to buy Gaza?
We're not going to buy anything. We're going to have it.
See, listen to what U.S. taxpayers' dollars to buy it. And instead of saying, well, or answering like, well, of course, obviously rebuilding costs money. You're going to have to guard with troops. It's all going to cost something. Instead, it's like, oh, well, we're not going to have to buy it because we're going to have, and it's, again, dodge. We're not getting a clear, developed outline of this plan because he just shot it out from the hip. He determined the fate of 2 million people on the whim during some press conference, probably without even informing his staff who had to scramble out and clean up the mess. And now we just got to live with it. He's going to make Egypt pay for it, just like he got the wall to be paid for by the Mexicans.